Hello! It's great to see you again in the video series about Mr. Tanfac's universe. Did you know that the moon once had a sister? What would happen if we detonated an atomic bomb in space? Or life on Earth was almost wiped out in 1969? Welcome to the Scary Facts About the Universe Part 7. The Apollo 11 mission landed on the moon, as well as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. To be the first to set foot on the moon has become one of the landmarks, the largest in the history of space exploration of humanity, so big that it overshadows all the other side events. That's why, to this day, many people still don't know that the human race was almost destroyed after this great event. Really? Maybe you don't know, after returning to Earth, the astronauts was not received warmly in the same way that King sports fans to welcome the heroes of Argentina. Instead, they're in special isolation for 3 weeks for quarantine purposes. Accordingly, Americans are concerned that to explore the moon in 1969, in the world, besides bringing fame and 21.5 kilograms of lunar rocks, it can be brought back to Earth, a previously unknown form of life, or was never thought to exist by the scientists, a bacterium, a virus, or a moonworm that Earth's life forms have never encountered, and therefore have not been naturally selected to resist, or easier to understand. Americans are afraid of a pathogen that could potentially cause a global pandemic. It's not just people, it's all the life on Earth. Obviously, to the present time, then we can confidently say there's no life on the moon. Or if there is, it's not to the point of doing us any harm. But suppose, if that year Neil Armstrong and his crew actually brought back to Earth a pathogen with the ability to eradicate all forms of life, what about it? The answer is Earth, most likely to have become a dead planet. Really, it's probably a law, though. The extraterrestrial exposure law was written by NASA, has included terms, the necessary processes to deal with any pathogen discovered on the bodies of 3 members of Apollo 11, like burning down the cabin, isolation to kill pathogens, or sending them out into space to isolate pathogens from the Earth, for example. Note that these measures are completely invented by us, but what NASA, the Americans, or even the whole world couldn't have imagined at the same time. That's what led to the tragedy that almost happened, which we just mentioned above. It's only been revealed a few years ago. Accordingly, in a post on social network X, Buzz Aldrin has admitted that the cabin that isolates them to the outside world, it's also isolating the Earth, with a potential catastrophe, has been improperly designed, with a crack just wide enough for an ant to get through, and that's enough so that any pathogen can spill out. Everyone knows the moon. It's Earth's largest and only natural satellite at the present time. But few people know that the moon may have had another sister. In fact, some scientists say the great collision between the Earth and there that we mentioned in the previous episode of the Universe series, in addition to greatly increasing the mass of the Earth, and gave birth to the moon, and accidentally spawned another tiny satellite, diameter about 1,200 kilometers, and it's about 4% the mass of the moon. But for some reason, that after about 10 to 100 million years of coexistence, the sister became disgruntled and killed herself by crashing into my sister's body at a speed of about 7,200 up to 10,800 kilometers per hour. This is probably why the surface of the moon, there's quite a difference on both sides, with the Earth-facing part smooth and flat finish, and the good part is the far side of the moon, higher than normal, rugged, and quite a lot of dust. The Sun is the largest object and the heaviest in the solar system. In fact, it's 330,000 times heavier than the Earth. It's 99.86% by mass of the entire solar system. And if you're looking for a number in a relatively accurate way, the sun weighs about 1,988 to the power of 27 tons, which is about 13% hydrogen, 25% helium. The rest are heavier elements like oxygen, carbon, neon, and iron. Just like the other stars, the sun lives on nuclear fusion. It's also called fusion or fusion reactions, happening inside the core, a process where two or more atoms are lighter will be aggregated to form heavier atoms. That's every second. The sun will again synthesize about 600 million tons of hydrogen into helium. This process causes the sun to lose about 4 billion kilos. That's 4 million tons of matter per second, in the form of energy released in the core and on the surface. To make it easy for you to imagine, every second, the sun loses some of its material, equivalent to approximately 800,000 adult African elephants. That sounds terrible, but in fact, at the same rate of mass whereas above, it's going to take 473,443,049 years. The sun has lost material. That's approximately the mass of the Earth, about 59,722 to the power of 18 tons. That's about 1 in 330,000 or 0.000303% of its mass. People define welding is the method or process of connecting the details. It's usually metal, by bringing the parts to the melting point or covering the surface. Two details need to be connected by another molten metal. Basically, want to weld metal, you need a high temperature, can go up to thousands of degrees Celsius, and yet people have the concept of cold welding. In there, the process of bonding metal parts, no need for high temperatures, and nothing's melted in the cold welding process. Accordingly, the cold welding phenomenon recorded for the first time in the 40s of the last century, when scientists realized two ultra-clean and ultra-flat surfaces of the same metal will stick together inside these vacuum cleaners. This phenomenon also causes certain annoyances out in space, especially for the mechanical parts and the antennas of artificial satellites. The explanation for this strange phenomenon, the scientists say that when the universe is essentially a vacuum, with the vacuum of understanding that there is nothing, atoms on two metal bars of the same type. Note that it must be extremely pure, clean pole and flat pole, when they come in contact with each other. There's no way to know that. They're two separate metal bars, and so will stick together forever. However, on Earth and under normal conditions, air, water molecules, layers of acid, grease, and impurities between two metal surfaces are the things that make metal atoms know that they don't belong together. Up to the present time, nuclear weapons, it's the most powerful weapon that humans once created. The largest nuclear weapon were built and detonated, called Tsar Bomber, a hydrogen bomb or H-bomb with a length of 8 meters, 2.1 meters in diameter and only 27 tons in weight, but has an explosive equivalent to 50 million tons of TNT explosives. And have you ever wondered, what's going to happen if we detonate nuclear bombs in outer space? In fact, you don't have to imagine, because the Americans detonated the H-bomb, called Starfish Rhyme, with a destructive power equivalent to 1.4 megatons. That's 1.4 million tons of TNT at 400 kilometers above sea level in the 7th of September 1962. It is also the first atomic bomb explosion in space. As long as you agree with me, the boundary of the universe begins at an altitude of 100 kilometers. Back to the question, what will happen if we detonate a soul bomb in outer space? The short answer is that it will explode. But things don't seem to be exciting, as you're expecting. That's because there's no air. There will be no giant mushroom clouds, as you often see. And there's no extreme heat shock waves, the main source of power. And what? To make the atomic bomb a weapon of mass destruction. But that doesn't mean that the atomic bombs, when the explosion in space, would be harmless. If it explodes near Earth, radioactive dust released from the explosion will collide with the top layers of the atmosphere and cause the aurora phenomenon spread over thousands of kilometers. It depends on the size of the bomb. In addition, radioactive dust is extremely dangerous. When it's possible, bake the electronics boards of the artificial satellite. At the same time, a threat to health, as well as the lives of astronauts. It's on a mission in orbit. Besides, the electromagnetic pulse waves, or EMP, will also shoot thousands of kilometers away, causing widespread power outages, disabling the navigation radar systems, global positioning system, and pushing hundreds of millions of people living in an era without electricity. The explosion itself was not mushroom-shaped, but it's going to be quite impressive, in the form of a bright sphere. Bright enough to cause permanent blindness if you try to look at it for the first 10 seconds or so. A little further away, about an atomic bomb is detonated somewhere in the universe. In addition to leaving a negligible amount of radioactive residue, it doesn't seem like anything worth talking about. Hello, it's nice to see you again. Terraform. It's a term used in science fiction to show the transformation process, usually a planet that doesn't sustain life, to be like the Earth, with the ability to sustain human life. Terraforming of Mars is the Mars reclamation hypothesis, in which people applied science and technology to make changes deliberately, Martian surface and climate, turning a large area of Mars to be friendly with people. That set the stage for colonization, to take control and colonize Mars in the future. In this video series, Mr. 10 Fact will find out with you how that people intended will be used to renovate our neighboring planet. Welcome to the Mars Annexation Mission Part 1. Before we get to the real question, like how to renovate Mars, let's clarify the question. Why is Mars? It's not any other planet. Maybe you don't know. The world's population in 10,000 BC, only about to point for 3 million people, and it took 11,800 years. Since that time, mothers all over the planet. That has brought the world's population to 1 billion. But also since that time for the world to welcome more 1 billion new members, increasingly shortened from 11,800 years to 127 years, 33 years, 14 years, 13 years, maybe even 12 years. When the world's population grew from 5 billion in 1987 to 6 billion people in 1999, or from 6 billion in 1999 to 7 billion in 2011. The scientists predicted, at the rate of growth, population is slowing down. The world's population will reach 11.1 billion by 2100. The population grows while the land, and countless other important resources, increasingly exhausted, causing a population crisis, almost, will become a matter of survival in the future. But that's in the case. Let's assume that humanity will maintain a healthy living environment for a long time, not being struck by an asteroid. Doesn't accidentally create a virus, causing a global pandemic. And not somehow that causes a nuclear war to make the Earth a dead planet earlier than expected. In short, it's about humanity, more specifically, the postpartum generation of us, to leave the planet of their ancestors. It's inevitable, and it's only a matter of time. But why is Mars? It's just a few minutes of Google. You can absolutely name a dozen planets. It's been suggested by scientists at NASA, the possibility of life. Or at least, it's also possible that conditions exist to sustain life. They're all characterized by being in one area, called the circumstellar habitable zone. Habitable zone, hey Goldilocks zone, is the orbital range around a star. We're the surface of a planet. It's thought to be possible for water to exist in liquid form, with the right atmospheric pressure, for human life. Of course, with constant progress and development, of science and technology in general, and of space science in particular. The scientists, increasingly equipped, of modern telescopes, which helps the number of planets in the habitable zone. It's been discovered more and more. But finding it is one thing. To get to it or not, it's a completely different story. Take the Kepler 6-F, for example. One of about 3,976 planets outside the solar system was discovered by humans as of 2019, and one of the most promising candidates to become the new home of humanity, next to Kepler 186F or Kepler for to be. This planet is 990 light-years from Earth, with a light-year of approximately 9.460 billion 800 million kilometers. To make it easy for you to imagine, to be able to migrate from Earth to Kepler 62F, it would take us 990 years to travel at the speed of light, or 3,116,183 years. If you're traveling at 343,112 kilometers per hour, or 0.064% of the speed of light, the greatest speed a spacecraft has ever achieved, recorded when the solar probe, Parker's solar probe, flies around the sun in the 11th of June 2018. This means that it is, for future migration, it doesn't last 1,000 or even 1,000,000 years. People are forced to invent a mode of movement, breaking all the current laws of physics. It's going faster than the speed of light. Or there's a simpler solution, is often applied to make intergalactic jumps. It's space travel through wormholes or wormholes. Unfortunately, this technology is currently only owned and controlled by the Hollywood film community. Talk about the wormhole, also known as the Einstein-Rosen bridge. This is a theoretical structure connecting to separate points in space and time to help create a spacetime tunnel, or more easily understood as a shortcut, to connect any two points in the same universe. Connect any two points between two different universes in the theory of the multiverse, or even connecting to different points in the timeline. It should also be noted that at the present time, about deep holes have the characteristics as shown above. Whether it really exists or not, it's still a big question. Back to reality. If the scientists, I feel like everything has just been shown above, too illusory, they can totally go back. With a renewable planet, the closest in the solar system, Mars. The question is, how do humans need to reinvent the planet? And obviously, to answer that question, we need to really understand Mars. According to Wikipedia, Mars receives about 59% of its light compared to the Earth. This causes the average surface temperature of this planet. It's minus 63 degrees Celsius compared to the Earth's 14 degrees Celsius. Significantly smaller diameter, volume, that the gravitational pull of Mars. That's about 38% of the Earth. To make it easy for you to imagine, a person who weighs about 70 kilos on Earth, it will only weigh about 26.6 kilograms on Mars. The atmospheric pressure on the surface of Mars is catastrophic. At 1/159th of the Earth's atmospheric pressure, with only 0.006 to 8 atmospheres, compared to 1 atm at the Earth's sea level. This number is significantly lower compared to Armstrong's limit. The limit that atmospheric pressure is low enough so that the water can boil at 36.5 or 37 degrees Celsius. It's the normal temperature of the body. What that means is, whenever you take off the special pressure suit, all kinds of water, not in a closed system, like the vascular system, for example, will boil violently and evaporate almost immediately. These types of water include saliva, tears, the blood and the wetting fluid in the lungs. And of course, if you pee on Mars, your urine will also boil and disappear soon after. What that means is, there's no liquid water on the surface of Mars. and yet the atmosphere is thin and viscous, plus the absence of the magnetosphere. That makes the ability to stop, as well as absorption, bad impacts from Mars' space environment, is very low, which makes people, along with most other living things, would also be almost impossible to survive on Mars, in its default state as it is now. With a high concentration of ultraviolet light, ionizing radiation from the solar winds, and many other types of cosmic radiation. Not just dilute, Mars' atmosphere is also super toxic, where 95.97% is CO2, 1.93% is argon, a rare or inert gas, 1.89% is nitrogen, a gas incapable of sustaining life and fire, and 0.0557% is CO, a poisonous gas. It's only 0.146% oxygen. To compare, the Earth's figure is about 21%. To get the oxygen of one breath, as on Earth, a Martian would have to, up to 14,500 times. And even though your lungs are infinitely volumetric, so that you can inhale continuously without breathing out, then obviously to inhale 14,500 times, you're going to need 7,250 seconds. That's about 2 hours. That means you're going to be dead for a long time before you get the oxygen your body needs. Not yet. Mars is also home to hurricanes, called by a very loving name, global dust storms, covering almost the entire planet, and it appears every 3 Martian years. That's about 5.5 Earth years. Of toxic soil when it contains high levels of chlorine, harmful to human health. And finally, of unsustainability at the molecular level, when people record the breaking of bonds between atoms in essential molecules that make up organic compounds. The only advantage we can find on Mars, it's 2 ice caps at the poles, with a volume of almost 3.2 million cubic kilometers, is equivalent to about 3.2 to the power of 15 cubic meters, with 70% of that being frozen water. 30% is CO2 ice, dry ice. It is said to be favorable because the water in the Martian Antarctic ice cap alone, enough to cover the entire surface of the planet, a layer 11 meters thick if completely melted. After fully understanding Mars, let's answer the big question together: how to renovate this planet in the next section. Hello, it's nice to see you again. Do you know where the moon came from? What is the largest natural diamond mine in the universe? Or what happened with flags planted by Americans on the moon? Welcome to Scary Facts About the Universe Part 9. The Giant Impact Hypothesis, sometimes called the Big Splat. Hey, they impact. That's the name of the Earth Impact Hypothesis, and a space object the size of Mars. It happened about 4.5 billion years ago. That's 20 to 100 million years after the solar system was formed. It's often accepted as an event that led to the birth of the moon, Earth's largest and only natural satellite. More specifically, the object collided with the Earth, commonly known as Theia, named after the goddess Theia, mother of the moon goddess Selene in Greek mythology. Accordingly, they with a diameter of about 6,100 kilometers. It's said to have been a collision, face-to-face with the Earth, at less than 4 kilometers per second. That's almost 12 times the speed of sound. The collision was almost liquefied, the surface of Theia and the Earth, making two giant space objects, as if merged into one. The Earth seems to devour Theia, while throwing hundreds of trillions of tons matter into space. Over time, the Earth cools down and becomes a rocky planet, while the mass is flung into orbit around the Earth. When you and Theia are doing delicate things, gradually converging under the influence of gravity, and form the moon. Despite the widely accepted theory, giant impact still faces suspicions about the energy generated from giant impact like that should have been left on Earth. Signs of a lava ocean on a global scale, or why Venus? There is no similar moon. One before. It's also been through a collision. It's not inferior in scale. The largest rough diamond ever found by humans. It's called the Cullinan diamond. 10.1 centimeters long, 6.35 centimeters wide, 5.9 centimeters deep, and weighs 3,106.75 quart, or 62,135 gram. It's just a small stone, and Cullinan alone, or the Great Star of Africa. Largest cutting piece. In a total of 9 large cutting pieces from the Cullinan diamond, with a measurement of 3 rounds of 5.89 x 4.5 4 by 2.77 centimeters. Same weight 530 ct. That's 106.04 grams. Currently attached to the staff of Queen Elizabeth II of England, that cost about $2.5 million. At the time 1908, or $51.4 million. At the present time. And that's just part of the value of a diamond. It's about the size of an adult's fist. Let Mr. Tan Fact introduce you something a little more stimulating. We invite you to the Popogai crater in Siberia, in northern Russia. This is the 4th largest crater in the world, in terms of diameter, about 90 to 100 kilometers, after the Vredefort crater in South Africa, Chicxulub Hole in Yucatan, Mexico, and Sudbury crater in Ontario, Canada, with a diameter of 160, 150, and 130 kilometers. Back to Popogai Pit. Collision at about speed from 15 to 20 kilometers per second, caused by an asteroid 5 to 8 kilometers in diameter, 35 million years ago. It's made a terrible hole and tossing thousands of cubic kilometers of rock into space, and it's caused billions of cubic meters of rock to melt, as well as turning large amounts of graphite. The main ingredient is carbon into diamond. You didn't hear me wrong, diamond. It's a diamond. More specifically, the sheer heat and pressure of the impact, or more precisely at the point of impact, has almost immediately turned the entire amount of graphite. It's about 13.6 kilometers from the point of impact. It's the most beautiful and precious form of carbon. Scientists estimate that the amount of diamonds that are made after the landslide impact, weighing trillions of carats, and it's worth millions and billions of dollars by weight, but is almost untapped by humans. The reason is because, in addition to being geographically too remote, the remoteness and the lack of infrastructure, most of the diamonds in Popogai are too small, with an average diameter of only 0.5 to 2 millimeters. Because the collision time is too short, along with the poor quality, where most of them are accumulated and connected together from nano-diamond particles with a diameter of less than 1 micrometer, and therefore, it's almost impossible to compete with artificial diamonds. If you're not excited yet, with a diamond hole, several tens of kilometers in diameter, please be introduced the Diamond Planet 55 Concrete E. With about twice the diameter, and it's about 8.63 times the mass. It's our planet, 55 Concrete E. It's considered the most expensive planet in the universe, where a large amount of carbon, both on the surface and in the core of this planet, under extremely high temperature and pressure, has been and is being transformed. Giant diamond fields. And if you're wondering, the cause of 55 Concrete E, become a giant diamond smelter. In addition to being composed of carbon-rich resources, is that it's such a small distance between it and its host star, 55 Concrete E, only 2,340,000 kilometers. That's 6 times more. The distance from the Earth to the Moon. It's only 1/64th of the time. The distance from the Earth to the Sun, about 150 million kilometers. According to scientists, carbon accounts for 1/3 of the mass of 55 Concrete E. Plus, it's mostly carbon, may have been in the form of diamonds. It is estimated the value of the planet diamond is about 26.9 by 10 to the power of 9 United States dollars. That's about 128.7 by 10 to the power of 18 times the US GDP, the world's #1 in 2018. However, before you think about planning annexation, as well as diamond mining on 55 Concrete E, please kindly note to you that the average surface temperature of the planet, about 40 light years from Earth, oscillating in the interval 1371 to 2300 degrees Celsius. It's enough to melt iron and steel. And if so, you still haven't gotten high, then we're forced to come up with the last thing that could get you high: a diamond star. Indeed, BPM 37093, or Lucy, is the name of a white dwarf star with 1.1 times the mass of the Sun. That's about 363,000 times the mass of the Earth, but it's only about 7,928 kilometers in diameter. That's less than 2/3 the diameter of the Earth, about 12,742 kilometers. So that's the material on the white dwarf. With mostly this carbon and oxygen, has an extremely high density. And there's something even worse. That in the course of studying Lucy, scientists found that 90% of her mass has crystallized, plus it's made mostly of carbon. That can only mean BPM 37,093, or Lucy is the biggest diamond, the heaviest, and the brightest that humans have ever discovered, with a mass of about 1/10 to the power of 34 tons. How awesome is it? When the Americans landed on the moon the 20th of July 1969, they planted 6 flags on the surface of the moon, perhaps to assert sovereignty. However, until now, the sovereignty of the moon, if based on the flags planted on it, will belong to any country whose flag is a pure white. This is because of the American flags on the moon. It's all been bleached, thanks to the amount of solar radiation, directly onto a space object with this 10-ton atmosphere. Yet the footprints that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin left on the moon, it has been and will be for a very, very long time. Maybe in 10 million years, 100 million years, or even for billions of years. As long as they're not accidentally hit by an asteroid, or the moon was destroyed for no reason. The reason is because the moon has a thin atmosphere, to the extent that it can be considered non-existent, with a total weight of just 2 African elephants, compared to about 1110 to the 14 children of the Earth. And so there's no wind and wind erosion, without running water and erosion by running water. In addition, all the volcanoes on the moon have gone to heaven, at least 100 million years ago, and therefore there's no earthquake, or any geological activity, can impact on the surface of this satellite.